All right. So thank you very much. And I want to thank Lawrence. He's going to help me quite a bit. So the idea is he's gonna watch the chat and he's going to be doing all the admin. And so if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, and he's going to be watching. He'll answer anything he can answer, and then at the end, then we'll do all of the questions at the end. So he can kind of be the host for the questions at the end. Let's get started. Yeah, I have one question I have for you, because these are not native plants. The idea here is I don't even know where this is supposed to be, but this is supposed to be a generic someone's backyard, and yeah, it looks green, right? The question is, what if this was your backyard and you went back there, how many insects do you see? And that is kind of the point. When I go in my backyard, one thing I see is a lot of insects, a lot of things flying around, butterflies and bees and flies, things like that. So the idea here is that we want to provide for the ecosystem. And believe it or not, many backyards just don't do that. So this is the beginning. This was way back in the beginning of my garden, back when I didn't have any of the big bushes and things like that. I actually have a picture kind of over the top of it. But essentially, when we got our house, I deliberately got a big yard because I wanted to have a big native garden, and it's, you know how it is. It's never really big enough, is it? It could be really big, and it's still not big enough. It seems like, and so I spent quite a bit of time putting together, and this is my garden now. There's a lot of a lot of different kind of bushes and things. The one recommendation they always make is try and have at least 20 native plants in your yard, and I'm way past that. So that's cool. This is one of the sages. This is actually an overview of my house. You can see it's the one with all the solar panels, and you can see the swimming pool, which, as you can see, it's got to be in the afternoon. And where is the swimming pool? It's in the shade. And believe me, my wife does not like that. She thinks that I should have put the swimming pool in the sun and my garden in the shade, which is too bad that I didn't do that when we had the opportunity. But anyway, my garden is in the triangle at the bottom there, and so it's about 400 square feet, which is pretty good. Um, and one of the things I want to talk about first, of course, is Doug Ptolemy. When I first started, I was actually doing more nest boxes and bluebirds and barn owls and things like that. And people kept talking about native plants, about how important they were. And I just kind of parroted that, not understanding it until I saw a video by Doug Ptolemy, and then it all became crystal clear. So if you've never seen Doug Ptolemy talk, there are a lot of Doug Ptolemy videos on YouTube, and I really recommend you go see. But there are some takeaways I need to point out, some real quick summary things that I'd like you to understand right off the bat. 96% of all terrestrial birds feed insects to their young. So if you can imagine, that includes a lot of seed eaters. And you might think, well, why would that be? Well, think about a bluebird, which is one of my favorite birds. A bluebird starts out as the size of a very small egg. 2 weeks later, it is the size of an adult. That takes protein to grow that fast, and that's why protein is so important, and insects are so important. And a large portion of those insects that are fed to the babies are caterpillars. And the reason for that is probably because it doesn't take that many caterpillars. A caterpillar is a big packet of nutrition compared to the size of a young bird. And they are They don't have corners. They're not beetles with strong exoskeletons, and so it's really good to be able um, to feed caterpillars, and they're super important. Um, there's an insect apocalypse happening right now, so the number of insects is crashing, and part of it is that we're getting too good at battling insects. Butterflies and moths are specialists at, especially the babies, the caterpillars, the larvae, are specialists at different kinds of plants. So when you look at any one particular butterfly, that's obviously monarchs are the obvious example because you're taught about those in elementary school. Monarch butterflies need milkweed. They don't need it. They obviously like it as an adult to drink the nectar, but their larvae actually need the flesh of the milkweed plant. They host off the milkweed, and it's not like all these other butterflies, and there are hundreds of them. Not like all these other butterflies and moths all need milkweed. They all need different native plants. And when you actually look at all these different native plants, most of them, the vast majority of them, have some insects that depend on them. So, for that reason, butterflies are really need host plants. So when we're talking about putting together a pollinator garden, obviously a lot of times when people think of pollinator gardens, they think of beautiful flowers and things like that. But it's not just beautiful flowers. It's important that we that we are providing for the pollinators in every sense of the word. The habitat is the food, water, shelter, space, everything that an animal needs to survive and reproduce. And that includes places to feed your young, and places to lay your eggs and stuff like that. One thing that Doug Ptolemy always said was all plants in your garden should have a sense of purpose, a purpose. For example, um, the you're going to get that. Uh, Sorry, I got distracted there. Um, all plants in the garden should have a purpose in there. And that doesn't mean that the reason he said that is because a lot of people say, well, now wait a minute. There are some non-native plants that I really enjoy. Some people very much like roses. Roses don't do much for the environment, but but if they make you happy, then they have a purpose, right? Whereas there are a lot of plants that are in your yard that frankly don't have a purpose, whether they're non-native, they don't contribute to the ecosystem, and they're just kind of there. They're there to take place, to take up space, and that's the kind of thing where we think maybe you could put in something that provides for the bees, for the butterflies, things like that. So that's what that's all about. We need to kind of have a paradigm shift because if something is not eating your plants, then your garden is not part of the ecosystem. And as I said, there are a lot of backyards that actually fit that, where there just isn't much going on back there. And all you have to do is spend about half an hour back there, and you will notice if you see things flying around or not. Do you see birds in your yard or not? Because the birds eat the insects, they eat, all the things that are attracted there. And if you don't have them, then obviously that's a problem. So the purpose of a pollinator garden should be for pollinators, not just pretty flowers, but you want them to provide nectar, pollen, host plants, and structures suitable for raising their young. And I'll talk about what that means. Um, what is a pollinator? Well, there are a lot of different kind of pollinators. There are the butterflies, moths. Now, butterflies obviously are beautiful. Moths are beautiful in their own way. They're obviously a lot more drab. And as Doug Ptolemy said, he was more worried about moths because a lot of people don't seem to appreciate the moths. And we're not sure, if some of them are in really big trouble and people don't even notice. Bees, obviously, flies, wasps, hummingbirds, and some other birds, and bats. Now, the honest truth is that bats, as pollinators. There are bat pollinators, but the nearest ones are probably down in Southern California, and they're actually more like in Arizona. And the ones that we have here in California are the ones that kind of come in from Arizona and go right back out again. So we don't see them, the pollinating bats around here. Uh, so butterflies and moths are important. Now, I also, as far as nectar is important to our lepidopterans as our host plants and a soft landing. What is a soft landing? This is a term that I heard Doug Ptolemy use. And if you think about it, one of the keystone species of our area is oak trees. It could be any number of different species of oaks, interior live oak, coast live oak, valley oak. There are a lot of different kind of oak trees, and all of them provide for hundreds of species of butterflies and moths. And when there are a few of them that actually leave their chrysalis up in the tree, but many of them drop to the ground and depend on hiding the duff or kind of maneuvering into just under the surface. And as you imagine, many of our oak trees in this city, my city of Manteca, many of our trees are in lawns. We do have native oaks, but they're in lawns around in our parks, or they are in concrete. In other words, there's a small rooted area, and then it's kind of sidewalk for the rest of it. And so when they drop to the ground, they don't it doesn't work. And so that's a lot of insects that simply aren't able to reproduce that way. They get swept away, they get swept up in the leaves or whatever, and taken away. So it makes it very hard. So the idea is that we need to have some of our trees, some of our oak trees especially, with a garden around it, so that when the insects fall, they aren't constantly being watered with the sprinklers. They aren't being mowed. They aren't being walked on. They are able to live there without being stepped on. So hopefully we can not only put kind of a garden around there, but maybe a little fence, doesn't have to be a tall fence. Just want to discourage people from walking around, because the footfalls of people walking around on those can actually kill these insects fairly easily. Um, so they depend on the leaves and duff underneath. Accessible water. Now, what the reason I say that is because they don't, it's not like they can drink from your swimming pool or from your dog bowl. They need a specific situation, like if there's a little puddle that they can kind of sneak up on in order to drink from that water. That's the kind of thing that they need. So you can have like a little dish with marbles in it or something like that, and water. And that would be really good. When I say the bat garden, obviously moths around at night, and I mentioned the bats that are down, that are pollinators. These are, just talking about insectivorous bats that are looking for a little meal of moths. And so a garden that has the ability to have open flowers at night is a bat garden. So, so you can make hummingbird gardens, bee gardens, butterfly gardens, moth gardens, bat gardens, demonstration gardens. There's a whole bunch of different kind of gardens that you can make. And butterflies, obviously, we need nectar plants. They need host plants, so they need both. And I don't think a pollinator garden is complete without butterfly nectar plants and butterfly host plants. Um, and this is the one. Lawrence, what's the name of this?
It has multiple common names, but buttonbush or button willow. It's not a true willow, but it sure
Button
has a
bush.
spectacular flower, and you can come to Lathrop anytime to see that in our pond at Camish and Cambridge Street. And it blooms late summer. And boy, that's a beautiful picture you took there, Michael.
This is from the restoration project the CNPS has going. that Lawrence is in charge of over there in Lathrop. So one thing about butterflies and moths is there's a lot of them that live in this area, and you can learn about them by simply going to Calscape. And if time permits, maybe I can get on and do a demonstration of the Calscape website. The idea is that you can actually look up what butterflies and moths are native to your area. And when you click on these photos of these different ones, it will not only show you what their range is of each moth and butterfly, it will also show you what their host plants are. And then when you are looking at plants, you click on those and it will show you what butterflies and moths are hosting off of it. So one thing I want to talk about when it comes to butterflies, obviously, is there are some endangered butterflies. I've been looking to see what kind of butterflies we have endangered around here. There are other areas, San Bruno Mountain, Santa Rosa area, where there are a lot of really endangered butterflies. One that I studied was the Bay checker spot butterfly. This is actually in the Bay Area. Bay checker spot butterfly used to live all the way from San Francisco all the way down to Gilroy, practically. And when you actually look at it, it's been studied, and they started noticing where the sightings were starting getting fewer and fewer until they got extirpated, which means locally extinct from different areas. And literally, it started in San Francisco. They're disappeared from San Francisco, then disappeared as it went further and further down in San Mateo County, then down into Santa Clara County until finally there was only one little area left, and it was down in a preserve area that they needed to preserve, and they did. They preserved an area for them, something like 17,000 acres of preserved land that has the native plants that they depend on. They depend on two plants. It's an owl's clover and a kind of plantain. And so what that means is essentially the bay checker spot butterfly is stuck. It's never getting off of that reserve because the plants that used to be there are gone. So the plants that it was depending on are serpentine loving plants. So serpentine is kind of a salty soil and it's not good for others. So basically, it allowed these two plants to exist in an area that didn't have much competition. Well, once you get these invasives that are able to stand up to just about anything, that went out the window. And so you end up with the invasive plants just crowd out these native plants, and that's just about it. So the only area that they're able to exist in is that preserve down in Coyote Valley. And then some butterflies were taken to Edgewood County Park, where volunteers maintain a habitat over there. So that's the two areas that they are in. Um, and and so I was curious, and I happened to look up a question that I really didn't think anybody had studied, but they had. The question was, how far will a bay checker spot butterfly go to migrate and look for new habitat? And believe it or not, somebody figured it out. It's about 5 miles. So if there is no other habitat within 5 miles, they're not going to find it. And what that means is essentially that if you set up stepping stones, this would have to be a big enough patch of these native plants maintained so that the invasives don't come in and crowd them out. If you put them within a couple of miles, they will find it and they will turn it into a nursery, and that will get them closer to their original area. And you could do that theoretically all the way back to San Francisco. So that's the kind of thing, and I'm only using it as an example because even though we may not have butterflies in this area as endangered as the bay checker spot butterfly, which is, by the way, a subspecies of the Evis checker spot butterfly. Um, if we were able to do it, we could um, around here. There are still a lot of butterflies and moths that need our help. And so that's why I'm trying to get everybody to have a pollinator, but basically a butterfly garden. When I say a pollinator garden, I'm hoping you'll kind of spread the love and try and help out all of them. Let's talk a little bit about bees, though. This is actually on gum plant, which is a you can see it's got kind of a big bulbous back on the flower right there. And gum plant is a favorite of green metallic sweat bees, but if you go over to La Loma Native Garden, and a lot of the photos here are going to be from La Loma Native Garden in Modesto. If you go over there, you will see just how many plants, how many bees and butterflies love gum plant. The bees need pollen, not so much nectar, pollen. And they need nesting sites. We'll talk about that. There are about 1,600 native bee species in California, um, 25 bumblebee species. There are 50 bumblebee species in the United States, about 4,000 bee species in the United States, but here in California, about 1,600.
All those vitamins and minerals and micronutrients come from bee pollinated produce. All the great things in life that we all love and enjoy, there's likely a pollinator behind it. If you like beer, you better like bees, because hops are pollinated by bees. If you like a good burger, you better like your bees, because alfalfa, which is fed to cows, can only be pollinated by leafcutter alfalfa bee. Many different products, many different veggies and fruits require different specialized bees. For specialized shaped flowers, you need specialized bees. For something like squash, well, you need a squash bee. For tomatoes and peppers, you need bumblebees. Honeybee cannot pollinate a tomato because a tomato requires the bee to come to the tomato, buzz it, so generate a specific frequency, and that forces the tomato to release the pollen, and the bee catches it, moves on to the next flower, and does the same thing. And that's how they exchange the pollen. So it's not only that we need bees, wildlife in general. When you think about all those birds that eat all those various tiny berries, they all need bees. So we need to really take care of them.
It's a really cool video. It's on YouTube. It's from the Missouri Department of Conservation, and it's a really neat video. I that guy does a lot of. He's a professor at one of the local universities over there, and he does a lot of. He's an entomology professor, so he does those things. This is a metallic green sweat bee, and Lawrence was asking about the plant. I actually saw somebody selling the seeds to these. This is not a native plant, and they come in many different colors, and they ended up over at La Loma. What Rhonda basically said is that a lot of people just go and they plant whatever they want over there. There's actually a Japanese maple over there that I kind of object to, but it's a neighborhood garden, and a lot of people just don't understand the what native means. So, but metallic green sweat bees love that gum plant I was talking about, and apparently they like this one too. So, at least this plant. Remember, I was talking about every plant has a purpose, or you want every plant to have a purpose. This one obviously does have a purpose, even though it is not a native. And there are many non-native plants that do produce a lot of nectar, a lot of pollen. I One Art Shapiro, who is a butterfly expert, who I don't always agree with, but um, he does point out that there are a lot of non-native plants that can actually do a really good job of providing these things. And so they can have a purpose. Non-native plants that that do the job can have a purpose in your garden. This is actually two photos from my garden, and these are that guy, the metallic green sweat bee. This one is actually taken at La Loma. This is taken in my backyard. So my backyard is all sand essentially, and the metallic green sweat bee I discovered going down and digging chambers and putting their eggs and pollen down there. This is 70% of all bees, native bees, nest in the ground. And so the idea is that they will go down there and they will put and pollen and their eggs, and then seal it up, and then basically make it so that when those hatch, they'll come out, and then they will leave that way. So it kind of makes me scared to think anything up. Another source of because there are different kind of bees and they all have different ways of nesting. I got found some logs, and I brought them to my yard and drilled holes in them. And basically, there are a lot of carpenter bees, miner bees, things like that. Even the leafcutter bees. The leafcutter bees, you can see this one is a leafcutter bee. Notice that leaf in the back, and notice how it's kind of a circle cut out of it. I have some Western redbud plants, and Western redbud is a favorite of these leafcutter bees. And they go and they cut a little piece out of it. Then they go in. I told you they put the egg, the pollen, and then gem in that leaf and turn that into a little cell, little chamber. And then they put all of the one I forget if it's male or female. They do a whole bunch of one one gender, and then they start doing the other. And so basically, I think it's the males are in the back and the females are in the front, or the other way around. I forget which one it is, but it's one and the other. So that's why they have to be long enough. This is a bee hotel. Now, there's a lot of really cool stuff in here. And it is really neat to be able to provide nesting material or nesting places for the different bees. There is an important caveat to know about bee hotels, and that is that they can become a place of parasites, and they can become a haven for the predators. So the predators, if they know the one place to go and find all of the different local bees in the area, then they can come in and raid, and that's a problem. So there are reasons to kind of have some over there and some over there and some over there, as opposed to just making everything into one area. So keep that in mind when you're doing it, because you don't want to make life that much easier on the parasites, and on the predators. You want to try and give them a challenge. So that's the reason why you'd want to have, instead of like a hotel, just like little B and B's. This is another way to do it. So the one on the lower right is a bumblebee house. Now, it turns out that there are a lot of different, like I said, 25 different bumblebee species in California, and they do different things for nesting. The black-tailed bumblebee, which is the one that lives in my backyard, can actually sometimes be found in your nest boxes, and which means that they live in cavities in trees. And so one trick that Doug Ptolemy talked about was taking a roll of toilet paper and putting it, and he was talking about where you can put it, and it gives them something to kind of burrow into and then turn into their nest. So what I've been trying to do is to figure out if I can put the roll of toilet paper into my nest box around the black-tailed bumblebees and let them nest in there, and that would be cool. Now, the one down here that you see at the bottom, that is not a standard nest box because it turns out that some bumblebee species nest in the ground in gopher holes. And this is one of those things where you want the bumblebees, but it turns out you don't want the gophers. So you've been going and trying to doing your best to get rid of the gophers. And in an area like I am basically where there are no gophers because I'm way in the middle, and so maybe the people on the outside part of my community have had to deal with gophers, but they never make it into my part of it. So basically, if I want to have these ground nesting bumblebees, I'm gonna have to make a nest box similar to that one. And then you see little tubes up there. Those are lengths of tube that could be used by the leafcutter bee or some of these others. Remember, I said now this one here on the left, that is actually those are fairly short, and a lot of the commercially available ones are very short. And remember, I told you that they start off with one gender and then they switch genders as they come out. And if it's too short, they only do the one gender, which is a problem. If all of them are coming out are males, then nothing's ever going to get nobody's ever going to get fertilized. Nobody's ever going to be having babies. So that's a problem. So so you want to have longer ones, which is why the one up above makes a lot of sense. And also those are kind of up under the eaves where it's not going to get rained on and stuff like that. Now I have another version of it, and that is when I do my pruning, I leave these stalks and the bees can use those. So that's a different kind of way for the bees to nest like that. And I have a lot of different kind of plants and a lot of different kind of stalks that I just have kind of sitting there waiting for something to come along and nest inside. So there's a bunch of different things here. We're going to talk about some of these things. This is nesting and overwintering habitat. That might not be something you even thought about, right? When you're doing your pollinator garden, you're not really thinking about, well, what are they going to do for the winter? But I want you to think about what they're going to do for the winter. It's just save the stems. That's exactly what I was just talking about. Leave the leaves. We'll talk more about that. Redefine the perfect lawn. I'm not exactly sure what they mean by that. Rethink how much you use mulch. And remember when we saw the little metallic green sweat bee digging into my garden? Well, if you were to again that overview shot of my house and then widen out and look at all of the other houses nearby, how much open ground do you think there is? Not much. There's a lot of concrete, a lot of lawn, a lot of chips, a lot of swimming pool. There are not a lot of open ground where they can nest. And and they may not need that much open ground to nest, but you've got the food, and it's kind of up to you to leave a little bit of open ground for them to nest in because you want them to have the actual habitat. And just having the food, that's only part of the habitat. If all we had was food, but we had nowhere to shelter, that wouldn't be habitat for us. Just save a snag and plant a log, and that's kind of the same thing I was talking about, where I actually found somebody had gone and sectioned out some wood, and I grabbed those and I threw them in my garden, so they're out there kind of rotting and available to be lived in by the different lizards and things like that. Build a rock pile or a rock wall, which again, I'm always like, when I move a brick, I always have to be careful because the lizards hide under those. And the lizards are they're predators that we want there in order to deal with insect pests that like black widow spiders or cockroaches or something. Provide a safe water source, and again, that's not you don't necessarily want to put they can't go to a swimming pool, so you want to give them something that where they're able to kind of sneak up in such a way that they're not going to fall in. So my swimming pool is so full of bees. And install a habitat sign. Um, this is a cool story. Over in San Francisco, they over in the Presidio, they did some habitat restoration, and they were pulling out all this ice plant, and they were putting in native plants again. And the silver digger bee that hadn't been seen in years and years and years was thought to be extinct suddenly showed up again. And that is cool. But you know what? You don't have to do that. I have a story of my own. This right here is called seaside heliotrope. There's another word for it, salt heliotrope. And it is all right, I'm gonna say it. It's not the prettiest plant out there, right? And I was looking around for different seeds, and I ended up getting a packet somehow of seaside heliotrope. And I don't know, I was thinking, do I really want this in my backyard? Well, at the time, I was working with Boggs Track Community Farm, and we were putting in a pollinator garden. And I thought, I'm going to give this to them. So I took it over there. Nobody was looking, and I just went and dumped the seed out. This is in October. Dumped the seed out in a particular area. Okay. Then comes February, and I'm walking into Boggs Track Community Farm in order to go over and look at the area that I was working with. And there are all these plants. I completely forgot about the fact that I had done this. I forgot about the fact that I put a packet of seeds here. I'm like, what plant is this? But then I started looking really closely, and this is what I found. But what I do want you to do is to watch for all of the movement. Do you see all that, all the crossing, everything that is just moving around like that? Those are all little tiny bees, little bees. Now, what would all these bees have done if I hadn't put that all those plants there? What would they be doing? Where would they be getting their food? And it just and that's all I did. I didn't water it. All I did was I dumped the seeds and let the rain take care of it. So I think it is a really cool thing that all you really needed to do was to do this. Now I'm going to be showing you some photos from La Loma Native Garden, and there's a lot of seed packet type of propagation that they've done where they literally just throw seed down. And I think you're going to be really happy with how it looks. So there's another bee. I've got a bunch of bee photos. The reason I'm showing you these is because bees are cool. And oh, how'd that butterfly get in there? And these are all different kind of bees. They're not honeybees. They're all different kind of bees that are all feeding on. These are all from, I believe, La Loma Native Garden. And by the way, Leif Richardson from Xerces Society taught a class on bumblebee, the Atlas training. And what he said was that La Loma Native Garden is actually the probably the best place to find native bees anywhere in the region. And the reason for that is because it's got so many different kinds of plants, of native plants, that pretty much all of these different insects are able to find something there. So just the longhorn bees, the leafcutter bees, the miner bees, bumblebees, carpenter bees, all these different kind of bees. This is a bumblebee in my backyard, and they only showed up like a couple of years ago. They hadn't shown up before that. So the at that point the garden was about 6 years old, and I had never had any bumblebees. And all of a sudden they show up. Well, when I don't think that they're nesting in my backyard, but I'd like them to be able to, because unfortunately you never know when they're going to get evicted from wherever it is that they end up um, being where their nest is currently. This is a wasp, and I have a bunch of pictures of flies, and for some reason they didn't make it into into the slideshow. Hoverflies are a big one, but there are a lot of different kind of flies that are they look like bees or one way or another. So there's a lot of really cool wasps and a lot of really cool bees, and so I want them to make sure to be included. And they are also many of them are also ground nesters that rely on open ground. Hummingbirds, of course. Now, and all these are coming from my yard. You can see they're drinking from the sage. It's a ruby. I'm sorry, Anna's hummingbird. But and then this is hot lips, the salvia. We're going to talk about a little bit more about the plants, but salvias are really cool, and the hot lips here has both red and white on the flower. There are a lot of different kind of salvias. I'm going to show you a couple of them, but hot lips is a favorite, and they're really cool. They're really cool plants, and so the hummingbirds love the sage, and the they love that. But one thing that they're looking for is they're looking for something deep and kind of tube-like. And so the California fuchsia and many of these other tube-like ones, if you want a hummingbird garden, and I had at one point I had a hummingbird feeder up. I don't have to have it up anymore. My neighbor has it up, but I don't need to have a hummingbird feeder up because my hummingbird garden is constantly being used by the hummingbirds. So this is a Mexican sage. It's not native to this area, but it is a favorite of the hummingbirds. And each of these plants puts out a lot of flowers, and they just are constant. The hummingbirds are constantly coming by and going around all of these different plants. I think they're not so much great for honeybees but for the hummingbirds, I think any hummingbird garden really needs to have Mexican sage. So let's talk about a couple of things you may have heard about no mow May. So where no mow May came in is that a lot of times when we see butterflies come in, they have nowhere to go for food, nowhere to go for the pollen and the nectar that they need. And when we're making a pollinator garden, that's not where we are because we are deliberately trying to give them things to for nectar, right? So the idea here is that people are looking and they're seeing the dandelions and they're in the clover in the lawn, and they're realizing that that there may not be any other anything else around for the butterflies and the bees to be drinking. Well, if we're doing our job, then we're going to be looking and trying to find plants that are blooming all year round, and I mean even right through the winter. And that may require some that are not so native, but it does require some that are good sources of nectar and pollen. And by doing that, we don't have to worry about not mowing our lawn. So I'm not I'm not, there's a reason for no mow May, but if we're doing our job right, we don't need to have a no mow May because we have the plants at all year round for our pollinators, and we don't have to rely on keeping dandelions and English clover around for them. Another one is leaves the leaf. Here's leave the leaves. So leaves are not litter. It is important. Now, I've heard different people gripe about how, and the honest truth is that this is a very unnuanced thing to say. And there are going to be times when you're looking and going, well, the leaves are going to kill my lawn, you know? Okay, you don't necessarily want to save the leaves on your lawn. What you want to do is to give the leaves a place to go, so that you're not removing them and throwing them into the garbage, throw them into the compost pile. So this is an Eastern centric meme here, but the truth is that if when I was in my entomology class, we were looking at insects and things like that, and the teacher told us everybody go and get some leaves. Okay, so you want to find some leaves, a big pile of leaves. You put it into a bag. You bring it to the classroom, and they had a Berlese funnel. And what this is a has a screen on top, and then you put the leaves on top, and then you kind of shake it around a bit, and there are small little tiny insects called springtails, but it's a whole bunch of different kind of species of very small insects, and they're living in these leaves, and they fall into a funnel and down kind of a series of funnels, then go down into, in this case, a a bath of something that wasn't very good for them. And then we put them under a microscope and we look to see what kind of different insects were living in those leaves. There was a lot of insects living in those leaves. And if you've ever watched a fox sparrow or some of these other birds down there kind of shaking the leaves, that's what they're looking for, is the insects in the leaves, right? It's the same thing that um, the cocoons from the the oak tree and things like that. And I mean, that's what we're trying to do is we're trying to save the food for the birds. We need enough of them to survive to reproduce, so we have a continuing population of these butterflies and moths. But I mean, a certain amount of them are going to be eaten. We don't use pesticides.
Michael, really quickly,
Yeah.
Linda wants to know if you can have too many leaves and sort of what kind of ratio of bare soil to leaves should you have, and where should the leaves be and where should the bare soil be?
Um, I would, yeah, because obviously if you put the leaves down in such a way that they're all over the soil, so you don't have any open soil, that could be a problem too. What I would do is try and get them all under the plants. But basically what you want to do is kind of give the leaves a place to be. And because I mean, I know everybody wants to have kind of a manicured lawn, and I'm not suggesting you never sweep up your leaves. And that's part of the problem is when they say leave the leaves, they make it sound like never rake up the leaves, and that's not what it means. It simply means you want to have your leaves in a place, and so you're going to have to figure out what might be acceptable in your area. But I mean, for example, if you have a like I have several rather large bushes, that's where I put the leaves. Or so there are going to be places where you'd prefer to have open ground, and where we need open ground. There are going to be places where you prefer to have bark. So uh, basically try and have a place where we can give, because a lot of times I think they don't necessarily want to um, when the leaves first come down, just go ahead and get them all into wherever it is you're setting your leaves up. If you can find a place to do it. Like I said, I put mine under the area under my bushes. I don't rake under my bushes.
That sounds like a
And
really good idea, so the insects can have a soft landing when they get
right, exactly. And then I
on the
just kind
leaves.
of put, and then I can push if I do want to have the trail cleared, then I'll just rake everything up under the bushes. And that way all the leaves are under the bushes. So at least they have someplace to go. And it's a soft landing, like you said.
And
So,
they help keep the weeds down under your bushes too.
yeah. So don't use pesticides in your garden. And I see what time it is, by the way, Lawrence. Um, the so you don't want to use pesticides. Um, and that includes herbicide if you can avoid it. So it's best to try and give the insect. Right now, in my case, my neighbor on one side actually hires someone to come in and spray the crap out of their house, and they're out there spraying the whole exterior of the house. They spray the fence line and everything like that. And we literally just had a presentation by Xerces Society, and they were pointing out that if somebody is doing that to their house, then it would be best if you can kind of have your preserve for insects away from that, because there is a certain amount of bleed over from a house that is just getting blasted with poisons. And luckily, my garden is on the side of the people that don't do that. And they're the ones with the bird feeders, and they're the ones with the hummingbird feeders, and the tree with the goldfinches that are always nesting and stuff. So thankfully, everything is the way it should be in my case. But we don't, the one thing you don't want to do is to go and set up a pollinator garden and then spray so many chemicals all over it that nothing can survive anyway. By the way, if you don't know about neonicotinoids, neonicotinoids are really horrible pesticides that are being used nowadays. They're really, really effective. It doesn't take much, and they will be in the soil for a long time. Um, and they um, they're systemic, so that, believe it or not, if a bee comes along and takes the pollen, the bee will die. If a butterfly comes along and sucks the nectar, the butterfly will die. Does that sound right? You don't want neonicotinoids anywhere near your pollinators, and but that's how it is. So um, we don't want to use neonicotinoids, and we prefer to get plants that are not doused in neonicotinoids before you get them, because even if you end up getting them and putting them in your yard, that could be um, a sort that you don't want those around there. Um, Ask at the nursery, hey, are neonicotinoids used on these plants? Sometimes they'll say, oh, well, we don't use them, but we don't know about the source of our plants. And unfortunately, the source of the plants may be a source of neonicotinoids. Um, and of course, I prefer predators such as lizards, toads, and and dragonflies and damselflies. And then if you're looking for, wait a minute, I've got all kinds of problems that I need to figure my way through, and I always have used pesticides in the past. So what am I supposed to do? Go to UCIPM on Google, and you can look there, and you will find ways of you just literally where it says put in your what's your pest problem. You put in your pest problem there, and it will give you a whole bunch of things you can do that are where pesticides are a last resort. It's not like the old days when you ask what you do, and it's always a matter of what chemical to spray all over your backyard. Um, okay, this is a photo, a banner that is actually in place right now over at the Bodum Triangle in Modesto. And what that is we are trying to do something. We are trying to set up pollinator corridors. Pollinator corridors are a way of um, giving. Remember, I told you um, about the bay checker spot butterfly and the stepping stones that we're hoping to get. Well, there is a river on one side of Modesto and another river on the other side of Modesto. How do the insects get back and forth? Well, they may not be able to go if they can only go a certain distance. And so what we want to do is to give them kind of a boom, 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 boom to get over there. And so the first two are going in. One is at the Bodum Triangle, and then the next one is at Tuolumne River Regional Park. Both of those pollinator gardens have been installed now, but this is just the beginning of the project. This is kind of a proof of concept that we're doing. And as you can see, this is a joint project between Modesto Parks and us. And so when you are putting in a native garden in your backyard, you're providing a stepping stone as well for whatever species happen to specialize on the plants that you put in there. And pretty much all native plants have something that depends on them. So this is a hummingbird sage. So you can imagine, see those tubular flowers. It's a sage. The truth is that uh, hummingbirds love sages all around. So, or they love the they love all sages because the sages tend to have those tubular flowers. But hummingbird sages are really cool, beautiful plants. Um, like in Clarkia, is another one. This is another annual. So this is an annual. Oh man, big blue. So this is bird's eye gilia. I can't believe I did that. And but it's glow gilia. So these are flowers. All the California poppy. The California poppy has a lot of pollen. It's not doesn't have nectar, it has pollen, which means it's good for bees. This is a kind of poppy. There are a lot of different kind of poppies. There's something called frying pans, which is a local California poppy that has kind of a yellow and orange. It's a really beautiful plant. And then Nemophylla menziesii, which is a whole bunch of different kinds of plants of wildflowers. I believe the one down on the bottom there is called five spot. The one up above is baby blue eyes. These are the baby blue eyes that were in my yard. Um, Here's another one called blue-eyed grass. It's not a grass, but it's a beautiful plant. The leaves actually look like grass. A kind of they come up like kind of a lily looking leaves, and you can see the flowers are really pretty. They're very small. Meadow foam was another one. Tidy tips. These are all really cool annuals. Cream cups. These are more cream cups. Now we're going more into perennials. Buckwheats. Buckwheats are. I showed you a whole bunch of bees that were all over buckwheats. There's California buckwheat, rosy buckwheat. There's sulfur buckwheat. There's different colors. This one's a rose red or something like that. Buckwheat, something like that. Ceanothus is a plant that when it is going full tilt like this, just the buzzing that is coming off of that plant from all the bees, it's you can hear it for yards away. It sounds like a little engine going over there. I love manzanitas, and this is a manzanita outside my house. That happens literally. I just took it. Like I'm like, oh, I need a picture of that manzanita, so I went out and took it this afternoon in order to put it in the in here. And then you can see behind it, these are sages. Those are it's a low-lying sage called called uh, bees bliss. Bees bliss. This is another sage, and you see a little butterfly or a little that's probably a fly actually coming in. Salvias. There's a lot of different color salvias. Remember, I told you about hot lips. This one's more of just a red salvia. There are a lot of different color salvias. This one is more of a white one. I have a salmon colored salvia. There's a lot of really cool salvias. Lupins are another one. And one thing about when you see some of these butterflies, a lot of times if they are hosting off of one lupin, they'll host off of all the lupins, and there are a lot of different kind of lupins in there too. Mallows. Here's an orange one. Here's a pink one. And if you want to see what these look like, you can see them over at La Loma Native Garden. Woolly blue curls is a beautiful plant. Matilla poppy, coyote mint, monkey flowers. You can see this is these are different colors of monkey flower, different kinds of monkey flower, and you can see that they have that tube that the hummingbirds just love, right? Those are beautiful plants, red, white. Mariposa lily. Somebody had this over in the Bay Area. Many of these plants I got during the Bringing Back the Natives Garden Tour, and I recommend it. It's coming up in May, like May 2nd and 3rd. Bringing Back the Natives Garden Tour. You can look it up on Google, and you can see that they're coming. This is Lacey Facilia and yarrow. There's a lot of different colors of yarrow, including white and yellow. Penstemon is the foothill penstemon. There's this penstemon is another one that has that deep throat. And then I wanted to talk about a couple of things. One is that when we're trying to set up a nursery, basically, with host plants, you want to have a patch of at least 3 feet by 3 feet, which is why it's good to have these bushes, because one bush can have a lot, it can be covered in flowers. But if you have just a small plant like this, you might want to have a bunch of them so that there's enough flowers to bring them in. Remember, these butterflies and bees are going to be coming overhead looking for something to eat, and they're going to smell what you've got down here, and that's going to bring them down. And if they can see a patch of these flowers, it's a lot easier to sense that they're there, and that will bring them in. So you want to have enough to get their attention. The reason I say seasonal flowers, I actually meant look at, there's a lot of information out there where you can look and see when the flowers are blooming, and you want to have flowers blooming at all times of year. A lot of them will be blooming around May or, April, May, June, but a lot of them won't be. And so manzanitas, for example, are blooming right now in February. So you want to try and have different kind of flowers that are around at all year round. Patrick Pizzo set up California Native Plant Islands. These are basically where you aren't able to go in and basically just put native plants everywhere, and or that it sounds like a really daunting task. So the idea is not to take such a huge bite out of it, but to make more of a smaller area and give a stepping stone, a corridor kind of thing. Primrose Way Pollinator Garden. So this one's in San Jose. That's Jeffrey Fontana Park. This one is from Juanita Salisbury and her Primrose Way Pollinator Garden in Palo Alto. where she basically had areas that she considered neglected. They were covered in ivy and things like that. She felt it could be better used. She at first started working in an area, and the city discovered her, and they liked it. And they, here she thought she was gonna get in trouble, and instead they're asking her to, no, can you do it over here too? That's really cool. These are at Annie's Annuals. They always have kind of demonstration gardens out there, and you can see that they have these nice rock walls around, and they've got raised flower gardens. Some of those are native plants, some of them are not. It's more of the concept that I like, where you have kind of the tall stuff and the short stuff, and how they have it. This is actually from Bringing Back the Natives Garden Tour, and I love the idea that these are small, contained gardens with that's not actually lawn there. I think that's dichondra or something like that they have there. But obviously you can see that they have, boom, 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 little islands. And so they are native plant islands. And so if you were thinking, you know what, I can't do my whole yard in natives. If you can do something like that, even just one little area, then it's gonna do something. And then of course I wanted to point out the birds do show up. That's in my backyard. The birds showed up. So it's not just pollinators that show up after this. And when we were over in Disneyland, they were talking about the Atala butterfly. And this is a story that Doug Ptolemy gave, and I loved it. I loved it to the point where I love this story. It was the last story he told during this 2018 talk, and then he's moved on and he's done other stories and stuff like that. And I told him personally that I loved this story better, and I was hoping he would tell it again, but I don't think he's going to, so I'm going to tell it. So the Atala butterfly is a butterfly that was living in Florida, and it was doing just fine, thank you very much, until the was it 1800s, 1900s. Turns out that they depended on one plant. They specialized on kunti, a plant that was found all around Florida. And something weird about kunti is it had starch nodules on its roots. So when you dig up kunti, you'll find starch. And people harvested starch from the roots of these plants. And that meant that they were constantly, they would just rip out the plants, didn't bother planting them back because, of course, kunti is everywhere, right? And so they'd rip out the plant, they would harvest the starch, and they'd throw the plant away. And meanwhile, the Atala butterfly is constantly losing habitat until finally there was very little kunti around at all, and the Atala butterfly basically disappeared. Back in the 70s, they wanted to list the Atala butterfly as endangered, but they couldn't find it. When they looked around for it, they couldn't find it anywhere, and they felt that it was extinct. It was too late. So they gave up. And the Atala butterfly was considered extinct. But oddly enough, kunti became a sought after landscape plant. And they started planting it all around Florida again. It's no longer there because just it's literally in people's landscape and people's backyards and stuff. And it turns out that somewhere there was a little reservoir of Atala butterflies. They found all of this kunti and they spread like wildfire. They saved the Atala butterfly by accident. And the moral of the story was, of course, if you can save a butterfly by accident, you can save it deliberately. So I just want to run through a whole bunch of, but this is all La Loma Native Garden. A lot of this is done with seed. Um, there's just these are different years. Um, and I want to point out that some of these shots were done during the uh, during the La Loma Modesto Pollinator Festival, and that is coming up on April 11th. If you are invited to see La Loma Native Garden in full bloom like this. It's on Encina Avenue in Modesto. And as you can see, there's just, it's a beautiful, beautiful garden. Um, Lawrence, questions?
That was wonderful, Michael. So, we only had one question in the chat and you answered it just the right time. So I would just recommend that anybody unmute themselves and ask Michael directly.
Is it too
So
late to plant wildflowers for
good. You
spring?
see that? Uh-huh.
No, it isn't. No, in fact, we're having all this rain right now. This is the perfect time to do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And when you do it, take pictures of yourself doing it, and then we'll put it in the next slideshow or put it in the newsletter. Yes, yes, please.
So, couple of years ago, and I'm going to tell you, I don't remember what plant it was, but I believe it was a black sage, and I don't know what bee it was, but it had bright blue pollen balls on its legs.
Wow.
Any idea where it got blue pollen? In the Stockton.
Oh,
I
no.
couldn't find it. I searched and searched on Google.
It doesn't, well, it's weird. I thought pollen was usually more like orange, right?
Well, it does come in
Um,
different color, but I've never
I
seen
would think
blue. That's
so.
wonderful.
I would think so. I
Yeah.
mean, it isn't even doesn't even necessarily have to be native, I would think.
It probably
But
wasn't, or we'd know.
yeah, you didn't see what plant it was near, did you?
It was on a black sage, but
Mhm.
that's not where the pollen came from.
Yeah.
And Michael, I did find blue pollen with a search, and it says the most common one in suburbs is Siberian squill. That's not a native one. Gilia, also known as blue thimble flower, hairy leaf hydrangea,
Oh,
and bluebells, Scottish harebells, and phacelia. So pretty interesting.
we have a California bluebells, and the globe Gilia was in my it was some of the ones that in my picture. And I've had those in the past. Unfortunately, they didn't come up last year. But I need to have like a list of annuals to go back and keep getting. Just for some reason they weren't coming. I haven't had much luck with California poppy, but I have a bunch of California poppies that are coming up right now in pots, and I'm looking forward to putting all those out there.
Yeah, the
You
point is
have
that
a yard full.
there's so much discovery once you put native plants in. It's just every time you go to the garden, you're just going to discover something throughout the seasons. And thank you, Allison, for discovering
What did you say, Allison?
You will have, if you have luck with poppies, you will have too much luck.
that.
They will be everywhere.
Yeah, well,
I, I,
Yarrow, I
I'm,
should have mentioned Yarrow is the same way. Go ahead.
It is. Yeah. So my other question was, how deep did you drill into those logs you planted in your backyard?
Not all that deep, but the what I should have done, it sounds like uh softwood is evergreen, like pine or things like that. And what I need to do is I need to have more softwood and like the softwood stumps in my yard. And instead, I happened to be driving by one of these orchards nearby, and they had taken down a tree. And I think that's relatively hardwood. It's like probably an almond wood. And the thing is that there's any number of different. Remember that we got the Valley Carpenter bee. Valley Carpenter bee is a huge bee, and so it would need a really wide hole, I would think, but I don't know how wide it's supposed to be. And so I started digging in it, and the wood was so deep. I want to get some pine, and I know I have friends who have carpenter bees that are always digging into their their digging into their wood on the, it's something that they don't want them to be digging into. Luckily, the one I know about, he finds it more fascinating than anything else. But I know that carpenter bees drive some people crazy because of what they do to the wood. So I would try and find softwood, is what I would use. Pine would be great. But there are a lot of different kind of softwoods. Anything that supposedly, so I would think that redwood is evergreen. So I don't know. Someone said something
I
like
have a
that.
quick question. My name is
Yeah,
Jane, and recently well, a couple of years ago, I'd plant native plants sporadically through my yard. I have an acre, and I had a lot of fatalities. And so I thought, well, I'll just do a side yard, which is also really big. And we got a native plant designer, and now we're going to have a landscaper who specializes in native plants help me and put a lot of native plants there. But
excellent.
the designer told me to get all these wood chips because we have hard pan soil and all this, and just
Hmm.
let it sit there for a year. And it's like
Hmm.
6 inches of wood chips. So now what do I do? Now the landscaper wants to come in and wants to push all those wood chips and start going on this landscape. And so she wants to push them to the side and then put them back on over the whole area because she doesn't think they're really going to do any good and all this. So I'm just confused. And should I bring them all back and then there won't be any bare ground for the bees? That's what I was.
So they told you to put the chips. Do you think the chips are being used to smother the weeds out? Is that why there's
Well,
six
I was
inches of
pretty,
them?
yeah, I was pretty good over a few years of really trying to go after the weeds, but there was still like bindweed and those that kept coming up. But it was just mainly to try to do something for the soil. And I guess she thought if I kept sprinkling them all summer long, that, they'd get into the soil or whatever and nourish the soil, break down in there. Because I have clay and hardpan.
Is the bindweed coming up?
A little bit, not too bad. Yeah. The wood
Okay.
chips have really helped, but I just want to know when it's all done, because I think the landscaper is coming a lot sooner than I thought. I thought it was going to be
Hmm.
late fall, but she says everybody wants to plant in late fall. So I go, okay. So I'll do it now and hopefully I won't.
See if there's some place that you can have some open ground.
Yeah.
I was wondering about the idea of maybe setting up, like getting a bucket and kind of taking the bottom off of it or something like that, and kind of making it so that you set kind of um an area up that allows them to, so that the wood chips are kind of around the the bucket, and
Okay.
it's, something along that line.
Yeah. So that there's open, you mean with um the bucket would have like open to the ground, you're saying?
Yeah, what I was thinking was if you have like a bucket, 5 gallon bucket,
Yeah.
and you remove the bottom, and then before they put the before they put the the chips back, you go and kind of dig out the hole, you put the bucket down so
Oh,
that now the bucket is a little bit under the ground, right? And fill it up
right.
so that the bucket is full flush with the ground. And then or maybe even up to the top, but then when they put the bark around it, then basically the bucket is there as kind of keeping the bark out. And
Okay. That's a great
that's just
idea.
it's just an idea.
Okay.
um but it's really cool to see like I said, you have all this food, you want to set up a complete habitat, and so they
Right,
need some place to nest. And 70% of all these different bees nest in the ground. So
right, right.
it'd
I
be nice
heard
to give
that.
them a place to do that. Yeah,
Yeah.
And Michael,
Okay,
from the
thank you.
yeah,
chat,
Thank you.
oh, thank you so much
yeah.
too. In the chat, Bill noticed that in the
Hey,
slide that you
Bill.
showed where it looked like a lawn with little islands of native plants, that
Maybe he
that's
knows
a
them.
yeah, a garden in Castro Valley with Lipia. And I did notice the little flowers amongst it. And by the way, they changed the name of Lipia. It was Lipia nautiflora. Now they're calling it Phylla nautiflora because they discovered that the Mexican oregano is a true Lipia. And so they had to put frog fruit, which is the common name of Lipia. And there are native Lipias and non-native Lipias. So always try to get the California Lipia if you're using that as a lawn substitute. It makes a good one, but it does tend to grow into all your other plants.
Let
And
me
then
guess.
real,
Bill recognized. Bill, you recognize that lawn, that garden? Go ahead, Lawrence.
oh, I was
He
going
Yeah,
can
to,
respond in it.
yeah, we've been to that garden a number of times.
It's a beautiful garden.
Yeah,
excellent.
and they sell seeds too
Wow,
that they harvest
fantastic.
from their own garden.
Wow.
That's cool.
And then John noticed that after he removed non-native cypress trees, that they had California bumblebees, the teddy bear bumblebees were tunneling in a hardwood tree and eucalyptus. So it's just everybody's just keen on noticing their environment, and as all of us kindred spirits, we sure love that.
So,
Well, Michael, everybody's expressing a lot of gratitude in the chat, and nobody wants to leave.
well, they're gonna you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Good deal. So, thank you so much for everybody for coming. This was literally just advertised in the newsletter, so it tells me that people are actually reading that, which is cool. Excellent. So I think we've made it to 8:30. So I think we ought to just go ahead and call it a day. And thank you all very much for coming. And we will see you in March.
Also, thank you so